There are some topics we can't talk about much here on YouTube, especially sensitive topics like this one, but I'm going to be different. Today, I'm going to present some loose ends about Columbine that I've never seen anyone discuss, with the aim of finding answers to them. So, let's get to the investigation. Based on official investigations and consolidated reports, the following occurred on April 20th, 1999, at Columbine High School. Two students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out a planned attack against their own school. They arrived armed with rifles, shotguns, and homemade explosive devices. Initially, they placed propane bombs in the cafeteria, programmed to detonate during lunchtime. When these devices failed to function as planned, they began shooting at students outside the school before entering the building. Inside the school, specifically in the library, they continued the attack, resulting in the deaths of 10 students. In total, 12 students and 1 teacher died, with many others injured. After approximately an hour of violence, the 2 perpetrators committed suicide in the library. All sources confirmed that Harris and Klebold acted as the sole individuals responsible for planning and executing the attack. Now that you know what happened, let's read the official timeline of the attack. The official narrative, as released by authorities and investigations, describes the events as follows. On April 20th, 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold skipped morning classes. Between 6 and 7, Harris and Klebold attend bowling class at AMF Bellevue Lanes. Harris is seen threatening Jessica Rosecrans between 6:15 to 6:20. 7:05. Frank Zerger observes Harris by the trunk of his Honda Prelude in the junior parking lot, possibly with another individual. 7:20 to 7:30. Harris enters the school with Sarah Leary, while 3 men in camouflage are seen in the north hallway. Around 8:36 a.m., Eric purchased 2 propane tanks at a Conoco gas station, and at 9:12 a.m., he purchased another tank at a Texaco. They returned to the school and, around 10:55 to 11 a.m., placed 2 propane bombs in the cafeteria, programmed to explode at 11:17, 10:15 to 10:20. Harris and Klebold are seen outside the school between the main and south halls. 10:40. Witnesses observe a black BMW with 4 occupants and a tanker truck making a U-turn near the school. 10:58 to 10:59. Security cameras show Harris and Klebold entering the cafeteria with large bags, presumably placing the bombs. 11:17 to 11:19. The bombs did not explode. Harris and Klebold then began firing from outside the school near the west entrance. 11:24. Professor Dave Sanders was shot and later died from his injuries. 11:26. Agent Neil Gardner arrived and exchanged gunfire with Harris in the parking lot. 11:30 to 12:08. Harris and Klebold entered the library, where they killed 10 students and injured others. Around 12:08, they committed suicide. They were armed with 4 firearms, knives, and homemade explosives. All the evidence indicated that they acted alone, without outside help. Or did they? Based on witness accounts and investigative documents, several inconsistencies emerge in relation to the official narrative. One of the most debated aspects of the Columbine case involves reports from witnesses who claim to have seen individuals other than Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold before and during the attack. Between approximately 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, several witnesses reported seeing groups of men dressed in black near the school. Barbara Karakusis described seeing 5 to 6 men, one of whom appeared to be over 20 years old, while 2 others sat on large backpacks. Tammy Solano Gonzalez reported seeing Klebold with several men looking inside the trunk of a tanker truck. Bruce Lebsack observed 6 or 7 men in black gathered around a green minivan, while Julie Thomas recalled 2 men in trench coats standing near a brown or gold pickup truck. As the morning progressed, additional reports emerged. At around 7:15, Abigail Bowles claimed she saw Eric Harris in the cafeteria with an unidentified man who was not Klebold. Later, between 11:10 and 11:15, Stephanie Haney reported seeing Harris and Klebold walking alongside a third man described as being over 20 years old with dirty blonde hair and a bowl haircut. Around the same time, Patrick Vassar said he witnessed 4 or 5 individuals in trench coats leaving the school's main entrance. At 11:20, Adam Campbell reported seeing Harris in the parking lot accompanied by 2 or 3 other men. One frequently discussed inconsistency concerns an alleged AOL profile update attributed to Eric Harris. According to CNN and several other media reports, Harris supposedly accessed an AOL chat room from his home computer at 8:41 a.m. on the morning of the attack. The reported profile included statements such as, "Today is my last day on Earth," and "Be prepared." However, questions have been raised regarding the authenticity and timing of this claim. No official AOL records have ever been released to verify the post, and it does not appear in the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department investigative files. Furthermore, no screenshots, chat logs, or IP records have been publicly presented as evidence. The timeline creates additional complications. Official receipts confirm that Harris purchased 2 propane tanks at a Conoco station at 8:36 a.m. After paying, waiting for an employee to unlock the propane cage, and loading the tanks into his vehicle, several minutes would have passed. The gas station was approximately 3 minutes from his home. Even under ideal circumstances, Harris would likely not have arrived home until around 8:40 or 8:41. At that point, he would still have needed to park, enter the house, boot up his computer, connect through a dial-up internet connection, log into AOL, access the appropriate service, and submit the message. Critics argue that completing all of those steps by 8:41 a.m. would have been virtually impossible. The missing cafeteria footage. Another frequently cited issue involves the cafeteria surveillance recordings. Although the cafeteria cameras typically recorded continuously, the footage from April 20th contains an unexplained gap. The recording stops at approximately 11:14 a.m. and resumes around 11:22 a.m., an 8-minute window that coincides with the period during which Harris and Klebold allegedly placed the propane bombs inside the cafeteria. Investigators stated that the bomb-filled duffel bags were not visible before the interruption but appeared once the tape resumed. Because no footage exists for those missing minutes, critics argue that it is impossible to independently verify exactly how and when the bombs were placed, or whether anyone else may have been involved. Questions about the propane tanks. On the morning of the attack, Harris purchased 3 propane tanks, 2 at 8:36 a.m. and another at 9:12 a.m. Some researchers have pointed out that the propane tanks recovered from the cafeteria appeared rusted and worn. If the tanks used in the bombs were the same ones Harris purchased that morning, they would have been brand new. The condition of the recovered tanks has led some observers to speculate that older tanks may have been used instead. Reports of additional vehicles also reported seeing suspicious vehicles and individuals throughout the morning. At approximately 10:40 a.m., witnesses described a black BMW containing 4 occupants, rather than just Harris and Klebold. A tanker truck was reportedly following behind. One witness stated that a passenger inside the BMW wore a light-colored cap, which did not match the known clothing of either shooter. At around 11:10 a.m., 2 individuals wearing black coats were reportedly seen exiting a small car that was not Klebold's BMW. If accurate, these reports would conflict with the official conclusion that Harris and Klebold acted alone. Reports of weapons before the official start. The attack is generally considered to have begun at approximately 11:19 a.m. However, some witnesses reported seeing armed individuals before that time. Around 11 a.m., Lucas Milne claimed he saw a man carrying a handgun in a hallway and heard what sounded like a gunshot. At approximately 11:15 a.m., Carrie Clapper reported seeing a man with a firearm near the top of a staircase. If these observations were accurate, they would suggest that weapons were already being displayed or even fired before the official start of the attack. Suspicious activity in the parking lot. At around 9 a.m., Lindsay Ludwig reported seeing 2 men hiding near a white pickup truck. According to her account, the men quickly ducked down when they realized they had been noticed. The incident remains unexplained. If the individuals were Harris and Klebold, questions arise as to why they would have been hiding hours before the attack. If they were not Harris and Klebold, then their identities remain unknown. Victims with controversies or unresolved questions. One of the most enduring stories to emerge from Columbine was the claim that Cassie Bernal was asked whether she believed in God and was killed after answering yes. The story quickly spread across the country and became the basis for the book She Said Yes, turning Cassie into a powerful religious symbol. However, later investigations determined that the famous exchange did not involve Cassie. The conversation actually occurred between Dylan Klebold and Valene Schnurr, who had already been wounded multiple times. According to Schnurr's testimony, Klebold asked whether she believed in God. After she answered yes, he simply asked why before walking away. Cassie Bernal, meanwhile, was killed by Eric Harris beneath a different table and was not involved in any documented religious discussion before her death. As a result, the widely circulated story that inspired She Said Yes was ultimately determined to be inaccurate. According to the official account, Rachel was sitting with Richard Castaldo near the west entrance of the school when the shooting began. However, witness Jennifer Small later stated that she had seen Rachel in the school's so-called smoker's pit with Eric Harris shortly before the attack started. This account conflicts with the official timeline and Rachel's reported location. Additional confusion stems from conflicting witness statements. Jessica Rosecrans' mother publicly claimed that her daughter was with Rachel when she was shot. Yet, in her official testimony, Jessica Rosecrans denied being with Rachel at that time. William Dave Sanders. The death of teacher William Dave Sanders remains one of the most controversial aspects of the Columbine tragedy. According to the official timeline, Sanders was shot while moving up a staircase at approximately 11:24 a.m. However, some witness accounts suggest a more complicated sequence of events. Several individuals reported seeing Sanders make 2 separate trips up the stairs and claimed he may have been shot at different times than officially reported. Questions have also been raised about missing surveillance footage. The cafeteria security recording contains an unexplained 8-minute gap between 11:14 and 11:22 a.m., a period that overlaps with Sanders' reported movements through the school. The official explanation states that a custodian was changing the videotape, but some witnesses have questioned that account. Perhaps the most debated issue involves the rescue effort itself. After being wounded, Sanders remained trapped inside a science classroom for more than 3 hours while suffering severe blood loss. Access routes leading directly to his location were reportedly blocked, and emergency personnel were instructed not to enter the building during the ongoing crisis. Some medical experts have argued that Sanders' injuries may have been survivable if he had received immediate medical treatment. Are there any living victims? This is a very strange detail that could be noticed on the old internet. If you searched the American social services system, you could see data on basically everyone who was alive or dead in the country. And curiously, many of the victims of the attack were listed as alive, with their supposed data on display. So, let's analyze these people. If we go to the American government's social registration system, we can find the exact records of some of the students who died that day. More specifically, Corey DePuter, Matthew Kester, Rachel Scott, Stephen Kerno, and William Sanders. All of these were listed as alive in the American registration system. So let's investigate these people by name. Stephen Kerno can be found by his father's name and his location within the company, and we found his current company. From the photo, you could even tell they're the same person. William Sanders can be traced back to his wife's name, and apparently his name was changed to David Sanders. This is because all of their relatives are pointing to someone named David Sanders, and the data matches. Corey DePuter doesn't have any relatives in the system. Even though they exist and have registrations, Corey doesn't appear anywhere. But going deeper into Stacy's records, we see that she changed her name to Stacy Guthrie, and curiously, in her records, there is a Corey Dooley. Apparently, this is the real face of Corey DePuter, but maybe I'm wrong. Matthew Kester was the easiest to find, as there's only one person with his name in the entire US registry. And apparently, he's now married and works for an agricultural company. And he's not even listed as a graduate of the same school in Colorado. Rachel Scott had a LinkedIn profile, listing her time as a massage therapist, model, and actress. This is important because Rachel knew Dylan from the Columbine Drama Club. Furthermore, she owns a modeling agency in Colorado, and she was arrested in Texas, not to mention her old Twitter account, where, if we compare the selfies on that account with Rachel's photos from '99, we can say they look like the same person. Now, here's the most disturbing detail I found about Rachel. One of her photos after the incident shows her in an ambulance with a man. This is FBI Special Agent Dwayne Fusilier, one of the 3 lead investigators of the Columbine massacre. His son, Scott Fusilier, who graduated from Columbine in 1997, was the one who recorded that famous video of Eric and Dylan in the black coats at the school. When journalists attempted to question Fusilier about reports connecting his son to a student-made video, he reportedly declined to comment publicly on the matter. At the time, FBI spokesperson Gary Gomez dismissed concerns surrounding the video, describing it as a non-issue. According to Gomez, the footage was intended as a parody involving a mad scientist and bore no meaningful resemblance to the videos created by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. However, the issue gained further attention after reports emerged that Harris and Klebold had produced separate videos depicting armed students shooting a bully. Supporters of this view argue that any possible connection, no matter how minor, should have been examined more closely in order to avoid questions about impartiality. Others maintain that no evidence has ever been presented showing that the video had any direct connection to the massacre or to the official investigation. Some alternative researchers have proposed a far more controversial interpretation. According to this theory, the existence of earlier student-made videos involving armed individuals suggests that scenarios resembling school attacks were already part of the school's culture before 1999. A small number of commentators have gone even further, speculating that the Columbine massacre may have involved elements of a planned exercise or pre-existing script. Another aspect frequently highlighted by conspiracy researchers is Fusilier's professional background. Before his involvement in the Columbine investigation, Fusilier had experience in psychology, crisis negotiation, and hostage situations, including work involving Stockholm Syndrome. Some theorists have interpreted this as significant, arguing that the massacre may have been used to study public reactions to fear, trauma, and authority during a national crisis. Under this interpretation, government agencies would have been interested in observing how individuals respond psychologically to large-scale acts of violence. The Stockholm Syndrome Bulletin supporters of these theories often point to an FBI bulletin discussing Stockholm Syndrome that was published a few months after the massacre in July 1999. They argue that the timing is suspicious and interpret the document as a possible clue to broader psychological objectives. Critics of this interpretation counter that the FBI routinely publishes materials on a wide range of behavioral and criminal topics, and that the existence of such a bulletin does not by itself demonstrate any connection to Columbine. One of the most famous photos of the attack is Dylan holding a Tech-9. That Tech-9 has a very bizarre history behind it. According to the official investigation, the weapon was obtained as follows. Mark Maines sold the Tech-9 to Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold for $500. He allegedly handed the gun to Dylan on January 23, 1999. Maines said that he himself purchased the weapon at the Tanner Gun Fair on August 2, 1998. To prove it, he presented a receipt from the company Eagle Enterprises for $491. It seems simple, right? But almost none of this story makes sense when you look at the details. The investigation accepted this version, but the evidence shows that it is full of problems. Mark Maines. He says he bought the gun in August 1998. Brian Distel. A witness says he was with Maines when he bought the Tech-9 at the Tanner Gun Fair in January 1999, almost 6 months later. Greg McKilliott. Another witness says he saw Maines sell the gun to Dylan in March 1999. We're already starting with 3 people giving completely different dates for the same events. Maines presented a receipt from Eagle Enterprises as proof that he purchased Tech-9, but the owner of Eagle Enterprises told police that this was impossible. He hadn't had a booth at the Tanner Gun Show for years and had no record of selling a Tech-9 to anyone. It turned out that the receipt Maines presented was actually for the purchase of a Glock 17, a completely different pistol model, and not a Tech-9. In other words, Maines used a receipt for another weapon to forge a document about the origin of the Tech-9, and worse, the investigators completely ignored it. Distel and McKilliott described the person who purchased the Tech-9 as a white man with long curly hair, wearing a Blackjack Pizza shirt, where some of them worked. Both witnesses identified this person in a photo album, but the name was redacted in public reports. The description perfectly matches Robert Perry, who did indeed work at Blackjack Pizza. This suggests that someone else may have been involved, but this was never properly investigated. While Maine's story was bogus, the actual tracing of the weapon through its serial number showed a different path. The Tech-9 was initially manufactured and sold to a wholesaler in Illinois. From there, he went to a gun shop in Colorado called Just Guns, owned by Roy Spain. When Spain closed the store in 1998, he transferred all his inventory to a seller named Larry Russell, who was supposed to sell the weapons on consignment at gun shows. If Maines had purchased the gun from Russell at the Tanner Gun Fair, the receipt should have been from Russell's company, Guns and Pawn, and not from Eagle Enterprises. That receipt never surfaced. The confusion doesn't stop at Tech-9, the double-barreled shotgun. Officially, it was purchased by Eric Harris at a gun show with the help of Robin Anderson. However, the date of this purchase is also conflicting between official accounts and Anderson's testimony. On the day of the attack, a police officer reported seeing a shotgun and ammunition in Eric Harris's room. Another friend, Eric Alt, said that Harris had access to his parents' guns. This contradicts the narrative that all the weapons were purchased illegally by them. Initially, it was reported that the serial numbers on the shotguns had been removed. Later, it was discovered that this was not true. The numbers were intact. The 10 biggest alleged inconsistencies in the Columbine case. 1. The unreleased rooftop video. One of the most controversial claims involves a video reportedly recorded by a nearby resident. According to reports, the footage allegedly showed two individuals on the roof of Columbine High School, one wearing a white shirt and another dressed entirely in black. Authorities acknowledged obtaining the video as evidence, but the footage was never publicly released. Officially, investigators maintained that the only person known to have been on the roof that day was a maintenance worker. For critics, the unreleased nature of the video raises questions about what exactly was captured and whether additional individuals may have been present at the school. 2. Dylan Klebold's alleged presence at Nate Dykeman's house. Another disputed claim centers on Dylan Klebold's whereabouts on the morning of April 20th. Several witnesses reportedly claimed to have seen Klebold at the home of his friend Nate Dykeman before the attack. According to these accounts, a neighbor observed Klebold's vehicle in Dykeman's garage around 7:30 a.m. Other witnesses allegedly saw Dykeman leaving and returning to school prior to the shooting, while his tanker truck was reportedly observed near Klebold's BMW later that morning. Researchers who support this theory argue that these sightings conflict with official testimony and suggest that parts of the timeline remain unresolved. 3. Reports of gunfire from the bushes. One claim involves a police officer identified as Brovsky. According to some accounts, she reported seeing and hearing gunfire coming from behind bushes on the west side of the school. The controversy stems from reports that an armed man was detained near the area. Authorities later stated that the weapon involved was merely an air rifle rather than a firearm. Critics argue that if shots were genuinely fired from that location, it would challenge the conclusion that all gunfire came exclusively from Harris and Klebold. 4. Allegations of camera repositioning. Some researchers have pointed to claims that cafeteria security cameras were repositioned before the attack. According to these accounts, a school employee allegedly stated that certain cameras had been adjusted to focus on a specific section of the cafeteria. 5. Surrounding Brooks Brown's testimony. Brooks Brown, a longtime acquaintance of both shooters, has also become a subject of debate. Researchers have noted what they consider inconsistencies between some of Brown's statements and documented records. One frequently cited example concerns how he contacted authorities. Brown reportedly stated that he reached law enforcement through an operator, while phone records allegedly indicate that he called the sheriff's office directly. Critics argue that these discrepancies raise questions about the accuracy of witness recollections during a chaotic event. 6. Conflicting accounts from Chris Morris. Similar questions have been raised regarding statements made by Chris Morris. According to some reports, Morris initially stated that he traveled to the school and was detained by police. Later accounts suggested that officers instead located him at home and brought him in for questioning. Researchers who focus on these discrepancies argue that changing narratives make it difficult to establish a fully consistent timeline of events. 7. The movements of Dave Sanders. Teacher William Dave Sanders remains at the center of several timeline disputes. The official version states that Sanders was shot while moving through the school during the attack. However, some witness accounts suggest that he may have traveled up the stairs twice rather than once. Students reportedly recalled seeing Sanders assisting others and moving through the building before suffering his fatal injuries. Those who question the official timeline argue that these accounts are difficult to reconcile with the available surveillance footage. 8. Rachel Scott and the cafeteria records. One of the more unusual claims concerns cafeteria purchase records. According to some researchers, records appear to indicate that Rachel Scott purchased food at approximately 11:32 a.m., despite official reports stating that she had already been killed by that time. Investigators reportedly attributed the discrepancy to an incorrect clock setting within the cafeteria system. Critics argue that the explanation raises additional questions about the exact timing of events, although no evidence has emerged proving that Rachel was alive at that time. 9. The case of Matthew Kechter. Another disputed account involves Matthew Kechter. A witness reportedly claimed to have seen Kechter in the auditorium helping students leave the building during the attack. According to the official account, however, Kechter remained inside the library and was killed there. Researchers who cite this testimony argue that, if accurate, it would require a significant revision of the accepted chronology. 10. The missing 8 minutes of cafeteria footage. Perhaps the most frequently discussed inconsistency involves the cafeteria surveillance tapes. The footage contains an approximately 8-minute gap between 11:14 and 11:22 a.m., a period that overlaps with some of the most critical moments of the attack. The official explanation states that a custodian was changing videotapes during that interval. Critics, however, point to statements suggesting that the tape change may have been completed before the gap began. Because no footage exists for those 8 minutes, researchers have speculated extensively about what might have occurred during that period. Some theories suggest the missing footage could have captured additional suspects, earlier movements by Dave Sanders, or other events not reflected in the official narrative. Whether these theories have merit remains a matter of debate, but the missing footage continues to be one of the most discussed aspects of the Columbine case.